Hello and welcome to Movie Night with Gabe and Andy. I'm Gabe.
And I'm Andy.
And we have... Guess what we have, Andy?
What have we got?
A guest!
Ooh.
We have a guest. He is my favorite Twitch streamer, and I mean that. I was a fan of his Twitch stream before I knew him personally, so I'm not biased. I really do like it. He is not only a talented and entertaining live streamer on Twitch, but an intelligent, marvelous human being. He is SuperChrisWorld on Twitch. Go check him out. Here he is. Chris, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Well, god damn, what a hell of an introduction. Thank you so much. I love this series. I love your guys' reviews. They're excellent and thorough. And yeah, I'm really happy to be a part of this. So thank you guys for having me.
Outstanding. And Chris is the person who I actually watched the movie we're going to review today with him on Discord. He was the one who introduced me to it, and can't be more excited. Yes.
All right, wicked. So yesterday or the day before, I said to Gabe that I might be running a little bit late because I had an appointment about my wisdom teeth, and Gabe immediately panicked and said, "Wait, are you having your wisdom teeth out?" And I went, No, it's just an appointment." And it was just an appointment, but anyway, I got there and one thing led to another, and guess what happened? I had my wisdom teeth out like 2 hours ago.
Ooh.
Are you serious?
Oh,
yeah.
no.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm built different.
I was okay. So first of all, I was spoiled on that a little bit because Milady, your significant other, your better half, messaged me and said that you were running late because they took your teeth from you, and I thought she was joking, and I jokingly said that I'm going to call you Toothless Andy for the rest of the day, and I am now because you actually got your fucking wisdom teeth removed before the recording.
Yeah,
Jesus.
I was there.
What the fuck?
I was there, and the doctor looked at them and he went, to be honest, he goes, where the ones that you need removed are the easiest ones to take out. I could probably get one of my students to do it for you, like now, if you want. And I just went, yeah, sure. And they just took him out, and yeah, here I am.
Were you at all? Did you have to be at all sedated?
No, I had a local anesthetic put in. Yeah. And no, it was fine. That it was quite interesting actually, because I mean I won't ramble on this because this is irrelevant. But basically, I was watching, as it was being done, the student that was doing it was actually having a little bit of difficulty, and another guy came in of like I think someone who's like a qualified dental surgeon, and he went, no, right, you're doing it like, don't do it like that, do it like this will make it easier. And then it worked, so I actually kind of got to watch a dentist being trained and that was kind of interesting.
And you got to be the dummy.
Yeah, they got to learn somehow on.
Test subject number 1.
Yeah, that's right, patient 0.
yeah, they have to learn somehow. I'm cool with it.
Damn, I have to give you massive props for that, to be doing this immediately after getting your wisdom. Like, that hurts. That really freaking hurts. Yeah.
You're literally like Brock Lesnaring your way through this fucking review that we're gonna do. Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, gotta commend him. Holy crap.
So yeah, what are we talking about today, fellas?
We're talking about Tron. And it is, I gotta say, one of the most fascinating experiences that I've ever had consuming media, which is a gross thing to say, but consuming media, it is one of the most fascinating experiences that I've ever had, and I'm sure we'll get into why as we go along. But what I thought we could do, fellas, is kind of go one by one and give our general take on the film, and then I'd like to talk about Tron as a property, if that works for everybody.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Okay, well, so why don't we go me, Chris and Andy, because Andy just had his fucking wisdom teeth out, so he probably needs to chill for a minute. So, I was alive, unlike the two of you youngins. Or younglings, I should say. Younglings. Star Wars terminology. The younglings. I was alive when this movie came out. Barely. This came out in 82. I was born in 81. I was not a fully conscious human being at the time, but I did exist in this world. And as time went on, I remember hearing bits and pieces of it when you would rent what we used to call videotapes.
Yeah, all right, Granddad.
Blockbuster, yeah, we would, of The Little Mermaid. You would see like bits and pieces of Tron, like you knew it existed, but nobody fucking watched it. Not me or any of my friends. I've never met a human being physically who's seen this movie.
I have.
So, well, wow. Have I met you physically? I have not.
I wasn't talking about you. But, I was talking about someone older than you.
What's that?
I was talking about someone older than you. My father-in-law, he saw it.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Yeah, so, I never knew, none of my peers growing up saw it. Nobody that I ever knew, to my knowledge, saw it. It was something that everybody was aware of. It was this movie that existed that had to do with computers, and it was lights and whatnot, but nobody ever talked about it or knew anything about it. So I had a lot of fascination going in. And I guess I'll get more into my impressions of it as a film maybe when we get to the part about Tron as a media property. But I was simultaneously impressed and baffled and underwhelmed at the same time, having seen the film. So this is a movie about a computer programmer who basically somebody stole his code and used it, and he has to go into the computer world or use the computer world to get proof that he was the one who actually wrote the code, basically. That's basically the plot of the movie. And considering how technical the dialogue in the movie is and the production of the film was, that really shocked me that it was such a simple story. And there's a little more to it because you get into subplots about so there's the programs in the machine are living conscious beings with their own society in the computer, and there's subplots about their spiritual beliefs about the users, who are us, who program them, and belief in gods or things like that. And there's little subplots in there, but the main overstory is just that this guy has to go literally the climax of the movie is that he got a printout. Like that was the climax of the whole thing. And that kind of shocked me. And if this sounds a little bit jumbly and muted and subdued, that's kind of what my feeling of the movie as a whole was. It was absolutely shocking to see these effects in 82. The movie looks like nothing you've ever seen before or since, even the sequel. Nothing I've ever seen look like that. Nothing that I've ever seen before or after did what this movie does visually, which surprises me, actually. But that's when it comes to the story and the characters, that's really all I can say about it. So, Chris, how would you describe this movie and your feelings about it?
Well, my history goes a little further back because you and I just watched this the other day. Which thank you again for joining. Check it out. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was how old? I must have been a teenager when I first saw Tron. And much like you, I didn't know a single person who ever talked about it. It had no cultural relevance. Didn't stand the test of time, I guess, culturally. Yeah. But I've heard about it, and I always thought, oh yeah, it's that movie, I guess, that The Simpsons made fun of that no one saw. Chief Wiggum was, or whoever was embarrassed to say he saw it. Yes, I mean no, and no. But it's crazy. But I'll get to that. But anyway, so I finally saw the movie when I was a teenager, and I watched in the worst way to watch a movie, like on a tiny TV and like the middle of the afternoon, the sun coming in. That's not the way you watch this movie at all. So my initial opinions, I thought it was corny, cheesy, outdated, lame. And most of those things are true. But that said, on subsequent viewings of the movie, I really grew to appreciate its uniqueness. It is a very special film. It's one of the most unique visually, and even for its time. It's something that you have to, I guess, be a little more mature, a little older to understand, is that these are products of their time. And for its time, it was very groundbreaking. It had such amazing effects. The story was pretty, like, this was the first like real delve into the computer stuff,
Yeah.
So there's going to be some bumpy areas, but I thought it did it pretty well. I do agree the characters are pretty, I don't want to say maybe two-dimensional. If one-dimensional is too hard, I'll say two-dimensional. They don't have much depth, but what I like about them is that they have certain quirks and charms that really enrich their characters a little bit. Like even just tiny stuff like Dillinger, when Alan comes into the office and he has his meeting with him, and Alan's getting up to leave, Dillinger awkwardly gets up too, and they just stand there like in this awkward silence until Alan leaves. Like that's very telling of Dillinger's character. He's the guy who's technically in charge, but he's not really the guy for that. He's not really a person in power. Him like Sark are both controlled by the MCP. Anyway, I'm getting too much into plot stuff.
No, for sure, yeah.
But I thought it's fun. It's a fun adventure film. It's a voyage through this new land, this new world we've never seen before, and visually incredibly impressive. It's amazing effects that took hell to make, groundbreaking CGI, and past the CGI, the backlighting animation, which speaks more to me, is beautiful. This is a neon movie, everything glows, and art direction wise, that's very much of that era when computers, video games were just light on a black screen. That's what computers and that technology was at the time, and the movie's very accurate to that visually, and it does it in a way that's very creative and beautiful, but still away from technical stuff. It's just a fun voyage of a film. Him going into the computer, Flynn trying to help these programs fighting in video games, and trying to take out this master control program.
Just to add a little addendum to what you said about the effects, earlier this morning I watched a video of a bunch of VFX artists sort of critiquing the effects in Tron, the original, and because they're modern video effects artists, so they have all the tools of the trade of today, and they were like, all those lights, boy, did they use this, that, and the other thing? No, this was 82. That didn't exist back then. Oh, they must have done this. Oh, no, they didn't have that back then. They were like, how the hell did they do that? So, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's very much of its time with effects that have not really been replicated since. Even nothing before or after Tron used backlighting to that degree. I know there's a lot of topics here to talk about. There's this characters, the effects, the cinematography, cultural impact, all that stuff. But yeah, just effects wise, yeah, it's stuff that to this day has never truly been replicated. Even the CGI, which you could argue is aged, but that's the point. This is specifically a movie from the early 80s, and that perspective on the technology of the time. That's what was available. It's like a time capsule,
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that, and I'll definitely get to some more of that in the section where we talk about the legacy, no pun intended, of Tron as a franchise. Well, Andy, what did you think? What was your take of Tron?
This movie looks like when you get a strike in bowling, and you look up at the TV, and they play those weird animations. Sorry guys, I didn't like it.
Go on.
Right. I'll just say this bit and leave that to one side, and then kind of go on. The first 10 minutes of this film is a mess, but
yes,
yeah,
I think then it goes on. I think the plot is very thin. The characters are even thinner.
Yep.
No one's got any motivation in any given scene. Like, Jeff Bridges has this entire thought process planned out, and we don't ever see how he comes to it. Like, he gets blipped into the computer world, and it takes it all in his stride, isn't bothered by any of it, and immediately kind of is able to adapt and adjust, and he behaves like he's lived there his whole life. There is no shock or anything, but we never see that. And the trouble for me with the characters, I think it's partly script and I think it's partly direction. I'll give two examples real quick. There's no stakes in the movie. What happens if Jeff Bridges doesn't prove that he made the game? What happens? As far as we can tell, nothing happens. It just sucks. He's not in poverty. His arcade isn't on the brink of closing or anything like that. He looks to me like he's got a fairly good life for himself. He's got this nice arcade. All the people that come to the arcade love him. He's got a decent little apartment above it. That looks like a decent life to me. There's no stakes for why he needs to prove it other than for the pride of it. And that's fine. But when you're telling a story, you want stakes. You're like, man, I'm going to lose my house because I don't make enough. The arcade might close. If I could just prove that I made this game. Those are the stakes that you put in to give that character motivation, so that when we're watching the movie, we really get behind them. But the film doesn't have that. And then in the direction and in the editing choices, we don't have it either. Like, that scene where Tron dies, obviously we know that Tron's not going anywhere. I must have blinked. I must have actually blinked and I missed it, because they walk in to the next room and they just go, Tron's dead. And I was like, is he? So I rewound and then I went, oh, okay. But the reason I didn't realise that is because you don't really see or comprehend what happened, and the two characters in the scene, they don't react. You don't get a reaction shot. One of these characters is meant to be Tron's girlfriend. You'd think that they'd go, Tron, no! And there'd be, that there would be some concern when your title character appears to have died. And instead, his girlfriend just no-sells it. And we never see anything. As soon as we're in the computer world, we never see anything from outside the computer world. So, like, what are Jeff Bridges' friends doing in the meantime? I don't know. But that's my, as brief as I can make it, kind of summary on where I sort of stood with the film. I guess I open the floor to discussion.
Well, I think it's. I just want for the record, Chris, did I not say a lot of that after?
No, because
I think you did too. Yeah,
I think Andy was there because that was verbatim. No, I'm just.
Yeah. After Yeah, Chris and I, we had a rather long discussion after it where I said that, and it's funny, I was saying it in the context of the film's no pun intended legacy and why it doesn't have one, and so maybe this would be a good time to segue into that. But yeah, I very much agree with that. I think the fact that when people talk about or think about this film, if they talk about it or think about it, they're going to be talking and thinking about the effects is kind of our introduction to one of the problems with Tron as a property.
I became aware of Tron, I actually think, via Kingdom Hearts as a kid. I'm not sure. I might have known about Tron before, but I can't remember that far back. But that might
is
have been
Tron in Kingdom Hearts? That makes me actually want to play that now.
Yeah, it's in either the first one or the one that it's the third game, but it's called Kingdom Hearts 2. It's in It's in one of the first two PlayStation games. I can't remember which.
I'm gonna check that out. So you became aware of it through that?
Possibly. I might have known it before, but I'm not sure. We're talking a long time ago now.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. As unpopular, as poor of a legacy as this movie has, it's always there in certain places. Anytime they've ever done anything in cyberspace, it's always a reference to Tron, whether it's Mega Man Battle Network, that one episode from Fairly Odd Parents, they reference it in Simpsons. There's always... You always find Tron in some weird places. I don't know, but it's something that consistently through the years, maybe not consistently, but through the years has been shown or referenced in places, even if the movie itself doesn't have the best reception.
Doesn't get watched. Go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just say when we talked about Summer Wars on the surface, there's similarities. Like, you go into the world of a game, but with Summer Wars, there's such this dynamic cast of characters who, even if they're not necessarily three-dimensional, they're motivated by the story. And I know this is a little bit of a stop, he's already dead, especially if you've seen our Gandhi Awards. But to compare, say, Tron to Summer Wars, and I felt like Summer Wars has this rich cast of characters, and in the first literally 5 minutes you understand what the Oasis is. But in the first 5 minutes of Tron, there's Pete from accounting, and he's been pushed about.
Yeah.
And he's wearing a hat, and they're like, no, do the Squid Games, Pete.
Oh, well, I mean, when I was watching this with Chris, he was saying in the first 10 minutes of the movie, he was like, dude, this opening is not good. What is happening right now? How are these characters? And I said, and this is true, by the way, video arcades back then made shit tons of money.
Oh yeah.
If you had an arcade like Flynn's, you made fuck tons of money off of that. That was all fucking profit with very little overhead, which is why they were so popular and why the arcade cabinets were fucking everywhere. And if you had something like that, you're absolutely right. If he didn't prove it that he made that thing, he just goes back to his unbelievable fucking Scandia and has, he didn't seem unhappy. And that was another thing that bugged me. Jeff Bridges' character, let me segue into the why didn't Tron become Star Wars? Part of the issue here is Jeff Bridges' character, he just kind of, no matter what's happening, he just kind of smiles and goes, "You don't think I can make that jump? I can make that jump." And he does it. Got to get to the something quadrant, blah, blah, blah. And he's just he has absolutely no there's no sense of where he is mentally or emotionally. And it's probably I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that you know, and I think Chris brought this up when we watched it too, is that the actors were sort of in the dark and didn't have a whole lot of a whole lot of like what's the word I'm looking for?
Understanding.
Feedback from
scenes, right? Think about it, right? Because you talk about the effects and that, and I will say I was pleasantly surprised by the effects in this, in that it didn't give me a headache, which is kind of what I expected it to do. But say, like, there's a point where Tron is on a bridge and he's got like a big American Gladiators stick or whatever, and two guys come up to him and he just like lightly extends his arms with no force and sends this guy flying. There's no oomph to it. Like,
I think it was some of that stuff because it's in a computer world or a video game or whatever.
I don't agree, because there's that hilarious moment where one tank bumps into the other and the tank falls, so they have physics. This was just a poorly performed stunt.
Well, no, I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying they don't have physics. But... Yeah. No, I get that, but I think some of that can be kind of excused. My issue with the let's just be generous and call it combat in the thing. One of the things that I said is that this movie needed its own version of a lightsaber. It didn't need glow swords, but it needed something.
It had the frisbee. Don't you love the frisbee?
No, but it can't be a frisbee. It can't be, I'm gonna play a game of racquetball that could result in your death. It can't be, I'm gonna play a game. It has to be some kind of.
It'd be the light cycles. If this had its own equivalent to the lightsaber, I'd say it's the light cycles. Like they've
that's probably the strongest.
I agree. Yeah, no, I agree. The problem there though is it's piloting a vehicle and having superpower. It's just it's too removed from what a person would normally do. No, you can't go. So, harkening back to the fact that this was the 80s, kids can't go outside and pretend they're riding light cycle. I guess they could ride bikes, but you can't slam into it. You know what I mean? You can't really play it on a playground or something, and I think that was part of the appeal of Star Wars. It's just nobody in this movie does anything that a human being would think was cool to do unless you like racquetball or frisbee or something. And part of the problem is this was 82. If this had been 87, that would be a different story, because you would be doing shit like this in video games that were a little bit more sophisticated, but it was too early for that, and it was too, I don't know, it just didn't have that kind of appeal, and it didn't have that kind of iconic device or whatever.
Before getting too much into the effects and everything and the legacy, I did want to circle back to what Andy was talking about with which I think are both probably a good starting point or what have you, but the structure and the characters and how they don't work. Because yes, that's absolutely like structurally this movie is fucking bizarre. It starts off, Flynn's arcade. It shows the computer world when really that should be a reveal maybe for later. I don't know why they're showing off like the big selling point of the movie within the first 2 minutes. Then you get into this actuarial program. Then it's back to Flynn, who's hacking into the computer. Like, not only, is it bizarre editing wise and structurally, it's not really giving the audience a chance to understand what's going on until well into the movie. It is a very bizarre script, and that is one of its flaws. And coming back around to the characters, they are hollow. They are absolutely hollow. This is a film with no depth whatsoever. Absolutely none. But I think they're likable. I think they give what they can to such hollow characters. They give them their own uniqueness and personality. Where you say, okay, that's Alan, that's Flynn, that's Laura, that's Dillinger. Like, I got it. Yeah.
It's always
Flynn is just so
like Jeff Bridges.
Sorry.
It's always going to be hard to not like Jeff Bridges.
Oh, for sure. He's the highlight. True. I mean, if you take him out of the movie, it's just so flat because everyone else. I mean, they have their quirks, but you need that that firecracker thrown into the movie, and he works excellent in that. But even aside from him, they give the characters little quirks and traits to make them more likable, despite being so hollow. Like him and Laura going back and forth with the hide and seek. Or her throwing the pillow at him at Flynn's arcade, and him making the jokes about her leaving her clothes on the floor. Just little touches. It's not depth, but it's giving them more character for people that aren't really characters, that aren't don't have no depth. So yeah, that's absolutely valid. The thing is, though, I don't think it ultimately matters all that much. I know that sounds crazy to ever say that characters with depth isn't an important aspect. I ultimately think it doesn't matter all that much because the film itself, like you said, the motivation is very simple, straightforward. It's really about everything is like simplified to make way for the journey. And that's very hollow. I do admit that, but it's a really fun journey in my opinion. If we're now getting into the effects, once Flynn gets into the world, even before that, the movie's so beautifully shot. It's 70 millimeter, which is another positive for it. It's shot in 70 millimeter. It's the cinematography is excellent. Once you do get into the computer, it is. I was
missing the outside world, I'll be honest, because
Sorry?
I was missing the outside world once they went into the computer because I loved the texture of the real world. I loved the use of shadow. I like you say. So you say it was 70 millimeter, right?
Yep.
So something for me that I like with older films is I feel that film, maybe because it is a physical texture that is being projected, like always looks to me that bit more real and tangible than digital.
Sure.
And I was like, man, this film looks really nice. And then for me, it went into the digital world, and I know it's still shot on the film, but there's so much rotoscoped over the top of it. I felt a bit like, oh, I don't quite like how this movie looks anymore.
So that's absolutely valid. I can definitely understand that. It's two completely different things in one movie, where it's this live action, natural lighting, real life stuff in 70 millimeter versus completely, like you said, rotoscoped, animated. All these effects on top of it.
Yeah, just to add a little addendum about that. That really, I totally get what Andy's saying, and you're right. And I kind of felt the same way. It was nice to look at a film that looked like that when they were in the real world, as opposed to what we see today doesn't look like that anymore. So that was cool. That really did. That computer world looked and felt different from the real world in a way that other stuff that was supposed to look different in movies that were made in that era kind of didn't. So in that sense, although I longed for it too, that really did work to separate that this is a different reality from the one that we live in.
I think that was a great way to do it. It is, like I said, they're very different, very separate. The live action 70 millimeter versus everything, like it's taking live action versus animation. Like they're very, very different. But like you say, it works in my opinion, because it's taking it into the computer world and it's supposed to be different. This is a world of no light, where everything, no sunlight, and everything's neon, everything's artificial.
Yeah.
And they're using these effects to really portray that while taking it away from reality. If they just bring it to a set and take in all these lights, then it just feels like just a part of that other world. Like you want it to be separate. You want it to feel very different.
Sorry, I'll just say like how the sequel doesn't feel like it's taking place in a computer world. Like, it doesn't. When you look at the sequel and how that sequel uses more standardized CGI and green screens and that, and I've seen the trailer and I've seen clips from the sequel, and I think the sequel looks very good, but it doesn't look like Tron does.
Yeah, it's not as separate. I'm not saying. I guess we'll get into Legacy in a bit, but I'm not saying that doesn't work. It's just not as strong in being separate and being a distinction between one or the other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They blend a little more.
Just to address the part about how Legacy looks versus Tron, and actually that's a good segue. Unless there's anything anybody else wants to say about the film as a film.
There's so much. I know I have to rein myself in because there's so much to talk about.
No, I would love for you to continue. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, so I was going to say, I think the issue for me with this, thinking about it now, after hearing you guys talk about how he just wants to prove he's got to find the file, the issue for me at the moment, narratively, like, so obviously moving aside from the fact that I didn't think that the characters were very good, and I don't really think the film looks particularly good, why isn't it a heist film? Why isn't it Ocean's 11 in a computer?
I think that'd be too limiting. I think that'd be too small in scale for something that's a completely different world.
But that is essentially what the plot is.
In the outside world. That's the beautiful thing.
Yeah, well, the thing is too, we also have to take into consideration sort of the spiritual element. You have the programs that they have this whole controversy about their religion, about the users and stuff, and
but they don't.
Very creative.
They don't do anything with it, which is my issue.
I agree. I agree with that, but the thing, but that's a problem with the fact that Flynn doesn't react to any of that, and that you have that one scene where I think it's Ram. He dies, and he's like, "Are you a user?" And he's like, "Yes." And that actually was one of the better performances from somebody. But I agree with you there, but that's what they were going for in the script more than just what they failed to do was not put in a heist element. What they failed to do was make Flynn care about their spiritual stuff.
I agree. Yeah. But from my perspective, you have this movie tries to convince you that you're going on a big epic journey, but you don't understand the geography taking place.
Yeah.
Whereas you're doing, say, if you do it as a heist movie, he goes into the computer. Okay, so now you're still doing that same journey, because obviously all stories revolve around the journey, but instead of the journey being him going on along that little gondola for 15 minutes, it can be a case of, okay, we need to get into this place. How are we going to do it? We could do this. Oh, and then I can do this. And then while I'm on the outside, I can be doing this. Oh, and then they come in and they're trying to get to the thing that they've got to get. But oh no, something goes wrong. Maybe then they have to use the for sake of argument, the light cycles or something like that, and you build the journey to be laser focused around what is essentially a heist, because this movie's plot is a heist, but they don't do it. And I think that's my problem with this film on the whole, is there's a lot of things you can say are mentioned in the film, and then you have to follow up with, but they don't do it. I don't know, but Chris,
you're right.
I was going to say Chris was actually going to say something, and then I cut him off accidentally.
What was I going to say? I'm sorry. You know, I think that might be too relatable and too small in scale, in my opinion, that kind of plot. It's a really, like, once you're going into this other world, it's supposed to be a big thing, and they treat it that way. You know, it's having these fights on massive game grids with the light cycles and the racquetball and the tanks and everything. This is much bigger in scale than I think you could give a heist story, in my opinion.
Well, Inception's a heist movie.
Well, let me offer this. Speaking of, no, Inception wasn't the Wachowskis. What the fuck am I thinking about?
No.
Let me offer this to that. I think there is a heist element in the movie. It exists in the movie. They just don't do what you need to do with that heist element. Just like I feel that they don't do what they need to do in the spiritual stuff or anything else really. And what I was thinking of as you guys were discussing this kind of reminds me of The Matrix Reloaded. That's the second Matrix film in a way, because that movie also has a lot of elements that seem like they're important to the film, but they never get around to saying why or doing anything with them, because the movie was so distracted by, we want to have this big freeway chase scene. We want to have this scene where Neo fights 1,000 Smiths. We want to have this scene where he flies. We want to, you know what I'm saying? In Tron, it's like, yes, we have these spiritual elements. We have this heist element. We have this ostensibly high stakes corporate espionage thing, but it's distracted by, we want to have the light cycle chase, we want to show these tanks, we want to have it. I think the movie got distracted in almost an identical way to The Matrix Reloaded, and I hadn't even ever thought of that movie in decades, but in the same way.
It doesn't take itself as seriously, though. It's not pretentious. It's not saying like this is the most important thing. You know, I think that's again what works the movie's strength is that it's not taking any of these things terribly seriously. It doesn't have depth, but it has a lot of detail, and I think that's what really helps it.
It felt to me like you were supposed to go like the movie was going to go to this point where he would have to get through the games in order to survive and get the information he needed. And it doesn't do that either. Because I was thinking, when I was watching it, I was thinking, this isn't a very good film, but bear with me, because I was born in 1994. It was a bit like Spy Kids 3D. Spy Kids... Yes, so the third Spy Kids movie takes place in a video game, and it borrows, I would say, quite a lot from Tron, and they have to do the thing or whatever it was, but the way they do the thing is by progressing through different elements of this video game and different challenges that they have to overcome that are linked to the game. And I understand that there's a degree by which they are limited by, they didn't know how games would develop, but they knew enough to have an element of, you have to compete in the game in the first place in order for it to be in the film. But then they don't do it. So it's like, it could have been a heist film, it could have been like a gladiator thing, and at the end they would be able to prove through whatever plot device you'd want to come up with, that by doing this gladiator tournament like in the video game, they could get the information they need. You could have done that heist. You could have done the Lord of the Rings thing, which I feel like is the closest to what they're maybe trying to do, but I don't think it comes across, partly because this film is only 90 minutes, but also because you don't really know the world, in that the film doesn't... In Summer Wars, the film communicates the Oasis to you, and you understand, okay, well, in Some Wars, this is... I think I've been calling it the wrong thing this whole time, but in Some Wars, the computer system, you know that it is linked up to all these different things. You know that it's linked to people's phones, to their computers, to their Nintendo systems, all of that. And because of that, you know how Love Machine will negatively affect everything in the world. But in Tron, you have the Master and Commander, and I guess he's a dictator, but what do they do? I don't know. Is this a community? Because the AI seem like they're people, but is this a community? What do they do? I don't know, because I've only seen like such a small aspect of this, and Yeah. Again, I'm going to stop because I'm just repeating myself. It's just a case of a they didn't do it.
Well, here's the thing. Whatever. No, and I kind of agree with both of you guys. I agree with Chris that this movie delivered its experience in a different way than a traditional movie would, and I did like I can tolerate that sounds like I think it's bad, but I can't think of another word. I can tolerate a lot of that from movies. But I think so I'm totally okay putting that in the it's okay for this movie category, but I think the fact that it did that really hurt it as a property. And what I mean is, whether you go harder on the heist element or on the spiritual element or on the characters or whatever you want to do, there comes a point in this movie where Jeff Bridges gets a hold of one of those flying things, and he's like, we got to get to the tower.
The flying houses.
We got to get to this tower. The flying house. Yeah, I love the way those things look. But he's like, we got to get to the tower. We got to get to I think it was like the mainframe tower or something like that. The tower of something. And the audience at that point is going, fuck yeah, because if we don't get to the tower... Wait, what happens if we don't get to the tower? Like, you're not driven by anything that's happening in the film. And when it comes to the characters, I'll make another comparison here. I think that these characters are only slightly less engaging than the ones in Avatar. And I liked Avatar. And I was engaged in what the characters in Avatar were doing, and I wasn't very engaged by what the characters in this film were doing.
Well, I think it's because Avatar, you can't take any of them out.
Not only that, but you're also when Sully flies on that giant pterodactyl, you have a frame in your mind of what a flying creature is like and what it would be like to sail through these mountains and waterfalls.
You know the significance that it has to the Na'vi people.
Yeah, exactly.
You know that whichever one you're talking about, you know that it's either a rite of passage for the Na'vi to bond with one of them, or if you're talking about the big one, you know that it's this fabled thing that very few people have been able to do, because they have that scene where they're flying and the big one attacks, and they say, like, only the greatest warriors are, like, once every how many generations have ever been able to tame that thing, planting and payoff. But Tron doesn't have that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. In the scene where he starts piloting one of those ship things, Ram says to him, "Wait, how are you doing this? Only a user can fly one of these things." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that." Really? Like, you had no idea that was one part of the rules, because the script is kind of a mess. So yeah. So without continuing to shit on the flaws in the movie, I think that's why this wasn't Star Wars. I think that's why this wasn't Disney's Star Wars. I think that's why Disney ended up having to pay $70 gajillion dollars to buy Star Wars instead of Tron already being their property that's like Star Wars. Because however good the movie is for what it is, when it comes to the engagement between audience and film, the highest amount of engagement that you're going to get with the audience is that it looks cool.
Yeah, and even then, I don't think it looks as good as Star Wars. You can say that the effects were groundbreaking, and that's fair enough, but does it look as good as Star Wars? I found out through, this is me parroting someone else, but I found out through the Red Letter Media Half in the Bag that I saw that Blade Runner came out the same year as this film. Groundbreaking though the technology may be, I don't think the film looks as good, and I think I understand why the sequel didn't try to recreate Tron as it like the world of Tron as it appears in this film, because I think though yes, we have to have it be a computer world, there still needs to be something tangible. There needs to be weight. Everything in Tron is so floaty and slow, whereas when Luke Skywalker is in an X-Wing and he's got a TIE fighter on his ass, you understand the danger there, partly because you know what those vehicles are capable of, because you've just seen them blow things up, so linking back to what you said before, but you feel the weight and the momentum of them, which is why I think the scene that people do remember is the light cycle scene, where they're having to make these really quick dodges and dives to get away from each other because they can't run into each other's line. It's like it's a competitive game of Snake, but you can can relate to being on a vehicle. A vehicle like that. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever been on a motorbike, but like I see that and I can kind of, like, from my own memory, feel the speed of what it's like to be on a motorbike. And I think that is why that is the scene that people remember.
They certainly don't remember the deadly game of racquetball, although that was kind of a cool effect. But let me
work out what was going on there though until I think it's in the visuals of this movie. I couldn't work out that the floor was meant to be disappearing. I don't know what it was. It might be me.
Let me Chris hasn't said anything. I want to let him respond to some of this. I want to say one more thing, and then I'm going to open it up to Chris. The one last thing I want to say is, think about this: the technique that they used in Star Wars to make the ships look like they were really flying, where you pass the camera over it and all that changed filmmaking forever when it came to simulating the movement of vehicles and that kind of thing. The technique, that the backlighting technique, all of the techniques that they used for Tron were never fucking used again. That's shocking to me, considering how much talent and creativity and effort went into that. So I'll open it. Let's open this up to Chris. Chris, what do you think?
I'm just trying to catch up.
Sorry.
That's a lot of different topics. I wanted to come back around though to the stakes of the movie. I know that's like 20 minutes ago, but the stakes of the movie, it sort of reminds me of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids in that way, where it's something that for us, like in a regular situation or the real world or what have you, this stuff isn't really that important. Like, really, it is just like, I'm hacking into the computer to get this information. But that stresses like the scale of us compared to this computer world. Like, they do see us as gods because our reality, we created them, and our reality is so much bigger than theirs. Like, for what for us is typing some shit on the computer to hack in to get that info, for them it's this whole thing. And I think that kind of works for the same way it does for Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which should be just walking from the end of the backyard to back upstairs to the shrink ray machine. It's the same thing here. What should be just getting this file, it's this whole other world where something like that means a whole lot more. It's not as simple as that. And Flynn has to, get into this world and figure these things out or get help along the way, whatever, to accomplish that. It's not quite so simple. For what might take us a second, takes them like hundreds of years or what have you. It's again a nice difference between that world and our world. How we're so much bigger and godlike to them, and they're so much smaller. Yet you take someone and put them in that world, and it becomes massive. When you're seeing it from their perspective, it's huge. I did like that. It's like you said about the Matrix. It's not really saying anything when it comes to the religious aspect. It's just it's just adding a lot of character and charm and detail, which is perfectly fine for me. What else? When it comes to the effects, it's true. Not apart from one aspect, which is the aspect everyone always brings up, because even now, like there's so much talk about the light cycles. The CGI, I mean, that CGI has aged, yes, but it was a huge influence, like, on so many animators and movies that came out afterwards. I mean, just 2 years after we got The Last Starfighter and things like that, like CGI was like really a big boom. I don't know if it's because of that movie. Maybe that's not fair to say, but it was sort of a pioneer that gave way.
I just want to say I said something very stupid that I want to make an addendum to when I said that none of those techniques were ever used again. Yes, CGI was used again after Tron. That was a very dumb comment that I made. Please continue.
Here's my dumb moment. I wasn't sure if it was CGI because I literally did not know how that... Because I had heard somewhere years ago that Tron didn't actually use CGI and that they used some other method, but apparently that's not true from what I'm hearing now. Yeah.
So some of it, yeah, a lot of what you saw on the screen was CGI that was, I don't know if this is the right term, but rotoscoped or something into the live action stuff. Although it did use computer generated effects that were amazing for the time. Some of the stuff that people may have mistaken for early CGI was animation stuff, right? But there was actually, so they used both techniques, but it was in there and it was amazing for the time.
Well, that's the cleverness of it, is that they understood how simple, you know, the effects, the CGI could be at the time. It couldn't do all that much, couldn't have complex geometry. So they sculpted the world, you know, in hand-drawn or whatever animation, 2D animation, to match that. I think that's what helps blend everything together, is that they understood the limitations of CGI. They understood like how limited the tech was at the time. Again, this is an era where what a computer was, what a video game was like characters made of light on a black screen. It's that simple, and the movie matches that very well. It connects to that very well in that generation.
Yeah, and I think the fact that I just can't get over how like I had said to Chris after we watched this, like, I can't believe my dad wasn't into this, because my dad was I had a PC in my house from birth. And I was born in 81. There was a computer in the house that I came home to after I was born, and that wasn't true of most people at that time.
My
dad was so into technology. I was surprised that he wasn't into this, but I think it's for the reasons that I had stated earlier. Just there wasn't a whole lot to get involved in.
On different levels. It's a hollow script, and also it's not. You're right. You were saying this earlier, which is another thing, another topic that we could get into. But it's technology and things that the average person wouldn't understand at the time. Even today, a lot of the lingo of Tron, I don't understand what the fuck it means, or I have a vague idea based on just context clues. Like that shit wasn't good to start with. It wasn't accurate really to the time, I don't think. It was like slang based on their limited understanding. That's so alienating. Like, it's alienating to us now. Can you imagine back then when you have even less understanding of a computer?
Yes, and when you're kind of, and that was back when you could make up terms and people wouldn't know because nobody knew what a computer was, other than it was this thing in a building at that time, so early in that time. And it's just, it's such a shame to sort of maybe steer this in the direction of why wasn't Tron a thing. It's such a shame because it's the only big special effects sci-fi movie from that era that I can think of that wasn't inspired by Star Wars and wasn't trying to be Star Wars. They came up with the idea for this in 1976. And they were not in any way motivated to make the next Star Wars. This was just a story that they wanted to tell, and it's such a shame that the one big thing like that wasn't trying to ape in some way off of Star Wars just failed utterly. But now, based on everything that I've said, by the way, another interesting aspect of this is that this was very, very, very much nested in the era of Disney, when Disney was sort of floundering and trying to figure out what the fuck it even was anymore. It was right after, not right after, but it was certainly post Walt, what are we even doing here, Disney? And it was supposed to be the thing that rooted Disney in sort of the modern era, and it just didn't. And another shame, considering now what I said before about this not being Disney's own version of Star Wars, that Disney now, it's so funny to talk about them trying to figure out their identity when they've become sort of a holdings company and not much else. Disney today doesn't, it's so pathetic in what it is as a company, but based on everything that I said about what this movie needed, more characters, this sort of followable plot and stuff, one may think that if you made Tron and put those elements into it, that you would have, boom, magic, and it would work. Well, they did that in Tron Legacy, and it completely fell on its face again, and nobody ever saw. I think less people saw Tron Legacy than there was. Absolutely, I want to say too, when Andy and I have discussed the fact that we think that the idea that Avatar had no cultural impact is a complete meme and isn't real. I know
especially now.
And Chris, I know you have a slightly different take, but without getting into that, I just want to say for the record, Tron is what that looks like. When a movie has no cultural impact, Tron Legacy is what that looks like. There was no interest or buzz. And I gotta tell you guys, I have seen Tron. I've seen Tron Legacy. I watched the cartoon. I'm getting one of the graphic novels. I played 2 of the video games. I went balls fucking deep into Tron. I know the deep lore of Tron in order to try and figure out why this wasn't working. Do you guys remember when Beck became Tron? So Tron became sort of like a Spartacus, like people could just adopt the name. Remember when Beck became Tron? Oh, you don't? It's because nobody watched that cartoon, and that was part of the plot of Legacy. The Tron Legacy, there's this whole backstory in that movie that Jeff Bridges explained, where they met these programs called the ISOs that were they were just spontaneously generated programs, not made by a user at all. And Clue figured it out, and he thought that they were dangerous, so he wanted to destroy them all. But then Tron, aka Beck, wanted to save them, and they got into this big battle. And he tells this whole thing. He's explaining the plot of the cartoon. You were supposed to have seen. They tried so hard to make this a big franchise story.
They were trying to make fetch happen, to quote Mean Girls.
Well, yeah, and it put in all of the elements that we've just said that Tron needed, and it was a huge success, right? No, it died. It died horribly, and I having consumed all of that Tron-related media, in order to answer the question, why isn't this working? I don't fucking know, guys. Well, I don't know. There's just something about... Oh, I'm sorry to cut you. There's one last little part of this. My guess is one of, if you'll forgive me, rather a long story, one of the writers of the show Thundercats gave an interview once. She wrote for Thundercats, which was a very popular show, and then later she wrote for Goosebumps or something. She was in all over little kids media. But there was a follow-up show to Thundercats called Silverhawks that very few people watched and very few people remember. And they were robots in space. And she was asked, why didn't that show work when Thundercats was so popular and it was the big follow-up to it? And she said, I don't know, but I think there's something about cat people that's more relatable and interesting, and something far less relatable and interesting about robot people. And I think that might be an issue that Tron has. I don't think that computer programs can be modeled in our minds as people in the way that, you know, that when the characters in the Matrix, when they go into the Matrix, they're still people, but I don't think we can frame something like that way. Maybe, I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think the reason it didn't work is that. So here's why I didn't see Tron Legacy. It came out about 10 years ago, and I was at the age where I could have hypothetically gone to see it. And I saw Tron Legacy, and I went, oh, it's a sequel to Tron. I haven't seen Tron. And then I didn't see it. I'd be more inclined to watch it now, because, alright, I didn't like Tron, but I was considering. So I watched this last night, and I knew I had to get up in the morning to go to the doctor's. Little did I know. But I watched the first one, and I went, okay, this was 90 minutes. If the second one is 90 minutes, I'll watch the second one too. And then I saw that it was about maybe not. Yeah, and I saw it was like maybe like 2 hours or 2 hours 15 minutes, and I just went, I don't have the time to watch this tonight. But I was going to. I had seen the first one. I was like, oh yeah, now maybe I will check out the second one. But obviously, if you can believe it, we've got a special guest star for an episode we weren't meant to record today. But
true.
But so I didn't have the time to watch the second one. Otherwise, I planned on doing it because I was going to watch the second one and talk about that. But for me, honestly, and I don't know how it is, what Chris thinks. For me, I know for a fact that I didn't see the second one in the cinema when it came out because I hadn't seen the first one. And at the time, a sequel meant a fucking sequel. None of this Ghostbusters Afterlife, I can go and watch it and have never seen the original, and it's like a sequel meant a sequel, so I didn't see it for that reason, because I hadn't seen the first one. So
That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that time, the reboot, remake thing, that wasn't as prevalent back then. That's true. It's a very good point.
Well, what do you think, Chris? Why isn't Tron Star Wars or something equivalent?
Oh, how much time do you have? It's different reasons, I think, for each film. I just want to say up front, I don't care much for Tron Legacy. I don't think it's as good as the first movie. But for different reasons. It's amazing. Each film has something. Both films, they fail in certain similar ways and different ones. And it's those failings, I think, that holds back the franchise from being a franchise or something bigger. Yeah. You know, the original, again, was very alienating to the audiences of the time, despite trying to appeal to them. It tried to take arcade graphics and terminology and things like that. But they really couldn't understand what the fuck was going on and things like that. And it's very dated because it's specifically that era. It couldn't be mid 80s or late 80s, because then you'd see like Mario Brothers influences and things like that. It's very specifically early 80s computers and computer technology. So it's aged, and that's something that's off-putting. I mean, the further you get away from something that's that, you know, that age, that's that specific an era, you know, it's less appealing to newer generations. I think that's the start of it when it comes to Tron. But yeah, I mean, there's like every issue that we mentioned is certainly a factor too. That, you know, it's not, it doesn't have good characters. It's not much humanity. You know, that's the thing. I think it could work, like you were saying. Can a movie about programs? I think it could work if done right. It still hasn't been done right for Tron, which is the problem. They've yet to get that right. That's something that the original and Legacy both share. They both are lacking in humanity. Legacy is a little better at that.
Oh, Legacy tried so hard. Legacy tried so hard to do the character stuff, and they just can't. I don't know. I don't know
it's
that
so thin.
It's thin, but it's so hammy, and his dad, and yeah,
it's dramatizing something that isn't that complex. I think that's the big issue with the heart. It certainly has more heart compared to the original Tron. What's the heart of that movie? There's nothing. There's no heart whatsoever. It has the slightest
the heart. The heart in Legacy is sort of writing checks that the movie can't cash, though. Like it's too. It doesn't. They're acting a lot more. Their emotional tenor is way more than what the audience is going to accept out of people that are in a computer and a kid who's Batman. And I don't know. That's a weird.
You know
movie.
What's funny though? 6 months after Tron came out, a movie with the exact same problem came out. And that was The Dark Crystal.
Thank you for bringing this up, because this is going to bring up a point I want to talk about in a little bit. So I'm sorry.
No. The Dark Crystal had the exact same problem. There was this lore that it did not explain, that it expected you to know, with these lead characters that just had nothing behind them. And at the end of the movie, you were supposed to go, all is well. But what instead you did was, why are they turning into Moomins?
True.
And the TV show came out, and it was very good, and then it got cancelled because it failed. I was thinking of there were two things that came up in my mind. The first was how Big Trouble in Little China would do a very similar idea of having the lead character not be the hero of the story. Big Trouble in Little China did that a couple of years later, but it's funny because The Dark Crystal came out the same year, and I think it has the exact same problems. And it was also a groundbreaking piece of filmmaking as well. But sorry, Chris, you were saying.
Oh no, that just reminds me of something I want to bring up, which thank you for. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut it.
No, all good.
82 specifically that year was a massive year for movies, but especially that summer. There were so many films out specifically that summer, and the one that was the most successful became the most successful movie of all time, E.T. And I think a lot of films in that summer were sort of overshadowed by the success of that. They were talking about that in the behind the scenes for Tron. I'm not saying that that's excusing any of the film's problems, but that's certainly, I think, a part of maybe the lack of legacy there. But that summer, E.T. completely dominated, and Disney was in the weird spot where they were the ones with the special effects modern film, and someone else had the cute cuddly film, and it was like so off-putting for them. It was so different. I think that's certainly, but like you say, regardless of that, like The Dark Crystal, I guess it's something that's, it's sort of alienating to the audience, whether for the tech reasons, the hollowness of the story, the weird structure. This is something that can't really appeal to everybody, even though it would like to.
Yeah, and Disney's never been particularly good at appealing to boys in the first place. And I think if you were going to go by, if I was in the marketing chair and they went, okay, we got this film called Tron, it's about this, that to me, conventionally speaking, that's a film that you want little boys to watch. Or like preteen boys to watch. You have your target demographic, and Disney has just never been very good at that. I understand now that they have the Marvel films and the Star Wars films, but they're kind of like subsidiaries. They're not the Disney creative team that made all of the classic Disney films you grew up with. But Disney always had an issue with appealing to boys. It would have films like The Little Mermaid and films like that, great movies, but they're the films that you want to get the girls in to see. And great movie though it is, in the 80s, you're going to have a hard time getting Timmy to see The Little Mermaid. So you want the film that would get little Timmy in with his dad while his mum and his sister go to see The Little Mermaid. And I don't think Disney were ever particularly good at doing that. Like the not the Dark Crystal, sorry, the Black Cauldron.
Yeah.
It didn't really work. Yeah, I think that was always a problem for them. Honestly, until they did have their Star Wars. When they did have their Star Wars, when they had Pirates of the Caribbean, like Pirates of the Caribbean, that is a franchise. That The Curse of the Black Pearl is a movie so good that audiences have been gaslit into seeing every one of those sequels that has come out in just the hope that it's as good as Curse of the Black Pearl. But until they had that, they were never really able to. They just, I think they weren't good at reaching that demographic, and I think this is another example of like Disney maybe not quite getting it. I could be totally.
That's another good.
I wasn't around in the 80s. I'm sorry.
Well, let me say a little something about that as yet another tangent. And how ironic is that a movie, we're discussing a movie that's comprised almost entirely of tangents, so this review is actually very apropos. I can tell you, and this is a criticism of Disney, not of anything you said, and not even really of Tron, but speaking of Disney and their demographic stuff, when did Little Mermaid come out? What year was that? 92?
89.
I think 89. Oh wow,
that was 89. Yeah. Okay, so 80s. I was, yeah, okay, so I wasn't even 10 years old. I can tell you, me and my brother and every other male child that I knew was fucking into Little Mermaid. We fucking loved that movie.
It's a great film.
Because it wasn't perceived as being a girl's movie or a boy's movie. It was just perceived as a movie about finding yourself, but it was as considering for having a female protagonist about falling in love with a prince. It was perceived as being very gender neutral. In the same way that like Secret of Nim is about a lady mouse and stuff, but we didn't look at it like that. And considering what Disney is doing now, somebody that I was watching earlier today, was another YouTuber, said this of Disney. He said, Disney, you didn't make the Muppets, and you didn't make Marvel, and you didn't make Star Wars. You made fucking Tron. And I was like, holy shit, that's a good point. All of the stuff that Disney actually made back when they had some dignity was as popular as the stuff that they now had to fucking raffle out of other companies. And it's just absolutely pathetic that rather than make the idea, I don't think any other company back then could have made a movie like The Little Mermaid and have it appeal to everybody. You know what I'm saying? But they had that juice. They had that magic. And now they have to go crawling to Lucas and crawling to Marvel to try and get some fucking... And yeah, they got billions of dollars, but that's because they didn't... There's no way to make it sound like an achievement.
To be fair, they've had Frozen, they've had Encanto. Encanto is a fantastic film. I haven't seen Frozen. I'm the one guy. They do create movies that Moana, but I like Disney movies best when they are doing animated films. I think Encanto is fantastic. I'll be that guy. I think it's great. You're completely right. It's not that they don't do that. It's everything else.
It's the fact that they have become, as I said earlier, they become more of a holdings company than an actually like creative, media company with people who are interested in, and yeah, those are great movies, but what are they the stuff that they're, the eggs that they're putting into their basket, which is a really weird way to say that, is Marvel and fucking Star Wars. They just, I don't know, I can't get over that. There's much more focus on acquiring IP than there is on making the next Frozen. And I just, unrelated a little bit to what we're talking about, but
it was what Michael Eisner said, though, because obviously Bob Iger is the boss of Disney again, because Chapek didn't work out, so Bob Iger left, Chapek came in. Chapek essentially said he didn't understand why adults watch animated films. Then Chapek was gone and Iger comes back in. But before Iger, it was Michael Eisner, and Michael Eisner said of Bob Iger replacing him, he said, I think Bob Iger's a great guy and a great businessman, but I don't think he has very much imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, kind of like Disney now, yeah.
And I can see why, like, whatever you want to say about Michael Eisner, he was creative. Under Michael Eisner, we got Disney Animal Kingdom, we got Hollywood Studios. In the theme parks especially, we got a lot of good with a lot of Disney business decisions that were problems for Disney, but you had the Disney Renaissance under him, and I do think there is a clear difference with that. And then you look at Bob Iger, and Bob Iger, I'm sure he's a swell guy, but he goes for IPs, and I think that's because that is him approaching it from a business perspective. And Eisner said, Eisner's attitude, he literally said this, was, first and foremost, we're a business and we have no obligation to make art, but in order to make money, we must make art that grabs people. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but that was what he said. So even though he was approaching it from a capitalist, let's make money perspective, he sort of viewed it as less purchase things people recognize, because then you have name value, and he was a little bit more create things that capture people, and then we get their money. At the end of the day, they're both cutthroat businesmen, but their approaches, I do think, they do show in the sort of work that they did.
I just wanted to. It's just so I think anybody that knew Walt Disney when he was alive would be humiliated by the fact, because to me, when you have to go, if Disney was in the position in the 90s of saying, let's go buy Nickelodeon because we can't do it, that means like you can't hack it in the bedroom. Like that means you can't get it up. That means that your shit sucks so bad that you have to go crawling to somebody else. And I don't think Disney shit does suck even today. As you mentioned, very fine movies that they made themselves, although they did buy Pixar, but they bought their writers more than their fucking computers. Let me say this, last thing I'll say about this, and I'll hand it over to Chris, about Disney. It's worth mentioning that Disney's success in what we now call the Renaissance era, who I was right smack in the middle of, their CEOs would have tanked the company, because and I want to preface this by saying I like Michael Eisner a lot, and I like the stuff that he did with the parks, even the stuff that especially the stuff that failed, because he wasn't afraid to try things. As risk averse as everyone is now, I appreciate that. He was also the person who made Disney's California Adventure, which was a disaster. He Euro Disney destroyed a bunch of plans for the parks. It set them back a lot. The thing that kept Disney going in the 90s was this very small team of writers and animators who made Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and Lion King. It was a very small group of people who were not executives. It was a very small group of creative people who the executives weren't even, they didn't even consider them as means to keep the company afloat. Eisner was focused on the parks and shit, and profit and loss statements on a ledger. It was that small team of people that made Disney what it was in the so-called Renaissance era. And to put a pin in that, Disney survived through the early to mid 2000s and even into the 2010s on the staying power of The Lion King and not much else. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, it's interesting. How much has changed. I agree. At least I'm trying to sort of bridge this back to the movies, but
Yeah, please
back.
do. We get lost.
Yeah, Disney just. I think that hurt Tron a bit being released under Disney. That's something I did want to bring up that was mentioned. I think that might have hurt it because it was in a slump at that time. And it's true. A lot of what Disney's put out, like, their original material or what have you, not other studios or what have you. A lot of that stuff has never been too big outside of the animated movies. And even then, it hit really big in the 90s, and then that was about it. I think that's one of the reasons the movie Tron might not have the best reception, is because you might view it with that Disney label, and maybe people did back then. Oh, it's a Disney movie, it's going to be corny, it's going to be cheesy, it's too kiddie, and maybe the movie is. That's a valid complaint if so, but I'm sure that label attached to it didn't help. And
I think that's absolutely true.
I mean, I'm not anyone who was around at that time, so I can't say for certain. I wasn't born yet. I wasn't alive in the 80s.
No, and at that time, Disney was seen as kid stuff, and not very good kid stuff at that. So no, I think that's absolutely right. Fuck me. Do you know what Tron needed, guys? You know what Tron needed? It needed fucking Steven Spielberg. That's what that movie needed. That needed to be Chris, when you said that, it just flashed in my head. That movie needed to be a Universal Studios movie, and it needed Steven Spielberg. That's
Absolutely.
What that needed.
I was also thinking Steven Spielberg, honestly, you can slap him on anything and it's going to be pretty good. Spielberg's actually my favourite director, which is my favourite thing to bring up whenever I'm talking to someone who's also really into film, because they always expect me to say something like David Lynch. But Spielberg is my favourite director.
Yeah, good for you.
That's what it needed. But I was also, as I was watching it, I was thinking about the whole aspect of like the faith and things like that, and I thought, it's such a shame Rod Serling had already died at this point.
Oh,
because Rod Serling would have been the exact sort of person to do a story like this. I mean, obviously, at that point, you're just into fantasy booking, because why would they ever contact Rod Serling to do their idea? But Rod Serling kind of went with these ideas in the Twilight Zone frequently, and I think Spielberg or Rod Serling, I think this sounds so mean because I know it was someone's idea, but it needed someone with just a more authoritative vision. There was a vision for what the film would look like, but there wasn't a vision for what the film would be.
Yeah. It was this is the first time live action director, I think, Steven Lisberger, the director of the movie, this was his first live action film. He'd only done animation up to that point. And it's very true. It's not the best understanding from him and the other writers that they had of what a movie should be like, hard, in the ways of hard emotion, structure. They didn't have the best grasp of that. I think they did the best they could with with their limited ability in that area, but for sure, I think, like you guys are saying, maybe a Spielberg or a Sterling, like someone who has a better understanding of how movies work.
True. Yes, absolutely. Because it's not a bad concept. It's a very good concept. This movie is Charlie Brown's Christmas Tree. It just needed a little love, and it needed a little bit more than what it got. And then going back to Legacy, and I hate to do this, but I gotta wrap this up because I gotta get ready for work. But going back to Legacy, it was such too little too late, and by the time Legacy came around, Tron Legacy just looks like every other movie that was released that year.
Yeah, here's the thing though. Here's the thing. Because we haven't brought this up, and I think this is a great thing to say about the no cultural impact thing. because I did not know this until I looked up the director of Tron. You know they're doing a third one, right?
Oh, they're trying.
I do know that. Yeah, they
Tron,
are.
Yeah, Tron Ares.
In production.
Yeah. While promoting Morbius, Jared Leto confirmed that the film is still happening. They're going to do I have to imagine that the third one will probably, like, again, like what Red Letter Media said, essentially, the third one will probably look more like the first one visually. But I don't agree that Tron Legacy looks like every other film that came out that year. But we'll leave that for another time, because the three of us can get back together again and talk about Tron Legacy.
Well, I think Chris wanted to say something about that.
Yes.
I think I cut him off.
I was just gonna say, and I'll be very brief because I know Gabe, you have to get going. And Andy, you haven't seen Legacy yet. Why that movie just didn't work? Why it didn't have the lasting legacy? It's a variety of reasons. I think it didn't talk enough to today's generation. It wasn't a great script. It didn't, ironically, it tried too hard to connect to the original film while not appealing to fans of the original film. It's so bizarre, Legacy. It doesn't know who it's trying to appeal to. At the very least, in the original Tron, they wanted to appeal to everybody. This one, it's like it's taking characters from the original film and storylines and trying to make it more dramatic than they ever were in the original, and writing them poorly. Like Tron is, I'm not going to give anything away, but Tron is in Legacy, and his arc, like, you could cut him out of the movie entirely.
Absolutely did not need to be there, and it's Tron. Yeah, you know what?
Also,
I absolutely agree with you. We are gonna.
Guys, smooth Jeff Bridges.
Go ahead, Chris.
Jeff Bridges never looked that smooth in his life.
Are you talking about CGI?
Yeah, that de-aged CGI. He never once looked that smooth. I paused it on him smiling and got Alicia to just look at it. I was like, look at smooth Jeff Bridges. He never looked like that. He didn't look like that in the first Tron.
Chris messaged me and he said, yeah, the fucking Jeff Bridges de-aging, oh my god. And I said, I think it can be overlooked because they're in a computer world. And he's like, no, I'm talking about Flynn CGI. And I was like, oh fuck, I forgot that they did that with the human. I was like, yeah, that looks fucking terrible.
So you can at least give some leeway, like you were saying, because in the computer world, it's a digital representation, so you can have some leeway there. But yeah, God, that CGI
not in the beginning. No, that was fucked. He just looked fucked up. Yeah. The last thing I'll say about Legacy, because something tells me we're going to get to the three of us again. In fact, Andy said that, and I'm fully on board.
I look forward to it.
Absolutely. The scene in Jurassic World where they find the old Jeep from the original movie, and they kind of do that.
Yeah.
You can't do. Nobody watched Tron, and nobody's nostalgic for Flynn's Arcade. Nobody knows what the fuck it is.
Why are you appealing to the previous generation for a movie that wasn't successful? You should. This is my big problem. Yeah, no one saw it. No one saw Tron. You should be talking to a new generation. And this is kind of segueing into Tron 3. This is my hope with Tron 3. Take away everything from the previous movies. Have no connection at all. Do something original. Do something modern. Speak to this generation. Don't connect plots to previous movies that were so hollow and no one cared about. Do your own thing and make it unique.
And totally. Get Daft Punk out of retirement. Do it again. They did it. They've done it once. They can do it again. Get Daft Punk out of retirement.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. If any movie in the fucking history of movies needed a reboot, holy shit.
Reboot, like start completely fresh or remake, even, I don't care, whatever it is. Do something new. Do something new. It disappoints me that in Legacy you're still having the most significant thing is instead of light cycles, we have a light plane. Like, that's the most creativity they had.
You're just squeezing blood out of a turnip for decades of something. It's fuck me. Yeah, I can't wait to talk about Legacy with you guys.
Shall I close this out? Well, it has been absolutely brilliant having you on, Chris. Hopefully we didn't...
Thank you again for having me.
Trying our best
really
not to drown you out.
And I really, like Gabe, echoing Gabe, I really look forward to if I could ever do this again with you guys. You guys are awesome, and thank you again so much.
Yeah, we will absolutely this year we will get together again, and we'll talk about Tron Legacy for sure.
And maybe the third one, depending on when it comes out.
That's true.
Yeah, if the third one ever does come out.